Hello, everybody. My name is Lukas Klingholz, and I'm very happy to be the moderator for the next couple of hours. So in the next couple of hours, we will take a deeper look into healthcare in particular, and we will look on cloud technologies, AI-based use cases, and it's an honor for me to introduce the first keynote in this slot. It's being held by Taner Topal, who is working for Adap, and he's talking about enabling medical AI through federated learning. Taner is the co-founder and COO of Adap, and before working for Adap, he was Director of Engineering at Xine AG and is the CTO of Mojo Reads. And we're very happy to hear your thoughts and your presentations and considerations regarding AI in healthcare.
Hi, I'm Taner Topal. I'm going to talk about medical AI, and short intro. It was made, so my background is historically in software engineering, electrical engineering, and I'm the co-founder and co-creator of the Flower framework. The company itself is called Adap. So Adap is a startup based in Hamburg. We created the startup in early 2020 based on the work of Daniel Beutel, who did he wrote a master thesis about federated learning. And I'm going to explain you how federated learning can help in the medical AI area. So, why do we need medical AI? So, I think a very well-known example in medical AI is generally skin cancer detection, because it's easily understandable. It uses visual models. With skin cancer, the survival rate when you're detected early is 99%, so the 5-year survival rate. At the same time, we have the problem that the current data sets, they have a kind of a bias because they usually come from the Western world, so people of color are disadvantaged in this case. So to understand what federated learning is in itself, I will first explain how machine learning happens today, and then later explain how we can get from there to federated learning. To do a machine learning project today, you have to start with getting some data. Getting some data means you have to either talk to a university or a hospital or some institution which has medical data. That usually involves also a lot of contractual work, which is kind of delaying often a lot of projects. When you get the data, you start by creating your training set, validation set, test set. I think for every data scientist or ML engineer, this is pretty obvious. After you have that, you will have to start to train your model. Training your model means you will spend some time optimizing that, making sure you get a good performance, and then you will have to test your model on your test set. And when that has happened and you are happy with the performance, the next step will be to deploy that model into production. So this is the first time the model will see real-world data, especially real-world data which is not just the data from a single organization. So if you're a startup and you sell that service to customers all over the world, you will be seeing data which you have seen in your in the data you used for training. So what happens then is you have to monitor your real-world performance, and often what happens is that people realize the model doesn't perform as well as it did in the internal test set. So you will have to go and inspect your model and your data and try to understand what happened. What's usually the case is when you're in Germany, you talk with German hospitals or medical universities, the data will be strongly biased to that hospital, to that region. So you will have to understand, or yeah. And then additionally, you might have some outliers because there's a conference, somebody came from overseas, went to the hospital, so their data is now also in that data set. The real world usually looks like this. So you have customers or people on who the model has to operate, which come from all over the world. So when you have trained a model here and you have to, it has to be used in South Korea, it might act actually differently. So the obvious solution here is usually we need more data, more diverse data. What are the problems? We can't share data, so it's usually, if you ever did a project with hospitals, you will realize it's like super hard to get access to their data. You'll have to go through a lot of reviews, you have to do a lot of negotiation, so it's near impossible to, like, if you want to get 60 hospitals all over the world together, you're talking about years of, talking. The first step with federated learning is in federated learning you also have access to the data of the, not directly, but you have to do something with the data of the customers or with the hospitals. But, I think something is happening here. Okay, so the first step towards federated learning, which is usually helpful, is federated evaluation. This means you start by evaluating your models on all the different sites without using the data for training. This is helpful because it creates trust and allows you to build the infrastructure necessary to do actually federated learning. This starts with you initializing a global model. You means usually an engineer or a data scientist. And given the infrastructure and the tooling, you send the model to all the connected organizations. So let's say you are doing you're training a model together with 3 partners. You will send your model to those partners. The partners will then evaluate the model locally on their data sets. Evaluation means they will check how does it perform, give you an accuracy back, and other metrics, and that will be sent back to your server. So having the metrics now, you can say, okay, my model performs this way or that way, and this will also help the organizations themselves to understand, does that model really work only at my place, at my customer base, with my patients, or does it also work all over the place? So do I have to worry if I get a patient from, I don't know, from South Korea? So when you have established that infrastructure, what you can do next is go into federated learning. Federated learning starts the same. So with federated learning, you initialize a global model. You send the same global model again to all the sites. And when they are there, they will be trained. This means there's a slight difference in that on the site you will have to have the right infrastructure to train the model, although that usually strongly overlaps with the infrastructure to evaluate the models. After training the model, you will have to send the updated model back to the server. Updated model means usually the model weights. So that's just a huge list of numbers. And on the server side, those weights will be aggregated. And this whole step, basically, from here onwards, repeats with step 1 until you have a model performance which you are content with. So if you want to do federated learning, how do you start? As I mentioned in the beginning, we have created the Flower framework, which is a federated learning framework used right now all over the world. So some of the users are, for example, the Korean pharmaceutical and I always Korean Pharmaceutical and Biopharma Manufacturing Association. So the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, Harvard University. There's a lot of research all over the world happening, and also in settings with, in the US, for example, 50 to 60 hospitals. I can't name them in detail, but yeah. Apart from that, the Flower framework has been adopted by a lot of academic and industry organizations, is open source, so you don't have to worry about what happens if, what happens in the future. We are trying to be industry neutral, so we don't specifically target medical or other industries. So you can imagine it's similar to, like, why do you use TensorFlow and not a specific AI framework to train your models tailored to a specific industry. As I said, we are based in Hamburg, Germany. It's one of the leading frameworks globally on federated learning. Yeah. Actually, that's it. So if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks a lot, Taner. Very interesting. Do we have any questions from the audience? So then I will just start with the first question I have. So you talked a lot about federated learning. I think there are pros and cons when it comes to federated learning. So what do you think are the disadvantages one has when comparing to have all data aggregated in one source when it comes to performance, accuracy?
Generally, like, if you're talking about the medical sector, aggregating all data comes with a huge effort. At the same time, federated learning has its own efforts, but those are more like setting up the infrastructure. You have a different kind of infrastructure you have to set up. So those are kind of disadvantages, but there are tools like the Flower framework and others. I think there are a lot of talks today about different ways to do federated learning. So in general, they can be dealt with, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I have another question. If there's other questions from the audience, feel free to ask your question. Please, do we have a microphone somewhere?
I can shout.
Yeah.
My question is that when the trained model gets back to the mothership from the individual, when the trained model in one of the satellite places gets back to the mothership, isn't there a theoretical risk that it contains information that can be extracted in clear, thereby, let's say, violating the requirement of data governance?
So in federated learning, like if you do it plain, there are these risks, yes, but there's a lot of research and already solutions to deal with these problems. So there's, for example, homomorphic encryption and other techniques.
I was trying to get to that. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that.
Sure. Differential privacy, maybe also to mention. Yeah. And there are solutions also for the Flower framework here.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience.
Thank you. One of the largest problems that you also mentioned is really getting access to the data inside hospitals, for example, to enable this federated learning. How do you approach these hospitals, and do you see things changing this effect, be it in Germany or elsewhere? How do you approach this? Because we work with a lot of companies that are also working on getting this data, and that's really the biggest issue, the narrative maybe. Thank you.
We are usually involved in collaborations with partners, especially universities, which have their network. So I think it's a pre-existing network helps a lot. And then again, you also have hospital chains, which have a lot of places themselves. So if they do those setups, it's easier for them. For example, our work with the KPBMA, that's a pharma association in Korea, that's helpful. So going through associations, yeah.
Thank you. Are there more questions? Otherwise, I would have one. As I don't see any yet, I will ask another question. So you presented the ecosystem you were building up, which is very impressive, I think. So you have a lot of universities within there. So what do you think about how to scale? So how do you get it really to the industrial use with relevant partners from healthcare ecosystem to bring it in use at scale?
Can you elaborate with Can you elaborate what you mean with scale?
Like scaling is an application which grows from more and more use cases where it's being implemented and used in real environments in healthcare.
I think for federated learning to really get everywhere, you need to create a lot of trust in the technology itself. I think that is happening right now, like all over the place. Also, I think one should keep in mind that in the future, with all these regulations coming up, not just in the medical area, but generally like GDPR and other privacy regulations, it will be we believe it will be the de facto way to train machine learning models. So trust will grow over time into this technology.
I think this is a very interesting link to another question I have when it comes to regulation. So we see AI Act upcoming as a regulation for AI, at least for European digital single market. So when you have federated learning, you don't have all the information. And for transparency reasons, for AI Act compliance, there could be the case that you need a lot of training data to show that you are discriminatory free, for example. Do you see risks there or like trade-offs?
I think federated learning actually deals with these problems by ensuring that we have diverse data and we have no access to the data, so we can't kind of...
That could be a problem. One could say, one could argue that because you don't have the data, you can't prove that that you're bias free.
Using federated evaluation is kind of the way to solve this. So you can ensure your model performs on all over the world, performs well. So I think it's actually rather a solution to that. Yeah.
We have another question from the audience.
Just a remark. I think the concept of zero knowledge proof could be really useful to that. So being able to prove the model works unbiased without ever exfiltrating other knowledge. So just sending the model to federated places and having just the response back on samples.
Yeah.
That should be reversed.
Thank you. So maybe one last question. When it comes to like next year's upcoming, what are your plans for next years and next months and years to grow and to expand the ecosystem?
So we're making the Flower framework easier to use, to make it so that it can be easily deployed also long term. The community is growing, so yeah, I think for us it's important to grow the community, create trust, and ensure that it becomes easier and easier for everyone to use the framework itself and federated learning through that and evaluation.
Thanks a lot, Taner. That was very interesting and insightful. Feel free to reach out to Taner in advance.